Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My name is Alex Dworkin, and I'm a managing partner at 4D Capital. We specialize in a very unique mathematical approach to the stock market, where we analyze the market and individual stocks in multidimensional space. And when we do, essentially perfect order emerges. On top of that, we've developed a number of very powerful timing indicators, and when we combine them together, we can essentially predict what the overall stock market or individual stocks will do in both time and price. Now, this very same work allows us to predict other events, such as wars. And this is the exact reason for the series that you see in front of you, Countdown to Armageddon. And the number of days you see below us is when our calculations suggest there's going to be a nuclear exchange between the Russia and China alliance and NATO members that will lead to a complete annihilation of the Northern Hemisphere and the death of billions. I believe this is a very important topic, and this is one of the reasons we're doing this particular series, is to forewarn people, to educate people, to show them how we calculate it and why it has a very high probability of happening. But not only that, we are here to give people hope, to prepare them for this particular event, as well as to show them how they can avoid this fate. And not only survive, but prosper after the fact. So today we're going to talk about a number of important topics. We're going to pick up where we left off yesterday. We're going to talk about Tomahawk missiles again. Let me just minimize this. So this is the book that we have coming up. I've just finished an update. We're finishing up the edit of it. Hopefully it's going to be ready by the end of the week, and we can drop it next week. And this particular book, which was originally published in 2014, is essentially prophetic from my point of view. You're going to be able to read it. You're going to be able to see what we predicted in 2014. It has unfolded perfectly, and also brings us into that time frame associated with summer of 2029, when a very powerful stock market cycle and a very powerful American war cycle combine together to indicate that there's going to be a nuclear exchange between, once again, Russia and China alliance and NATO members. So you're going to be able to see all of those factors in the book. You're going to be able to see exactly what's going to happen. You're going to be able to see how you as an individual, perhaps a family, can avoid this fate once again. And I also indicate some of the places where it is best to escape to during this period of time. So let's just very quickly look through all of the news associated with this Tomahawk thing, okay? Because this is very important. I'll talk about it in a second, but in the prior videos I talked about December 13th of this year as a very important time cycle hitting. So this time cycle has to do with Pearl Harbor and December 7th of 1941, which was an incredibly important date in American history. That's when, well, obviously Pearl Harbor happened, but that's when the U.S. officially entered World War II, and it's a marker, and we see something very, I don't want to say something very similar happening this time, but we see a very important event developing. This cycle arrives around December 13th of this year, and I speculated over the last couple of videos what that's going to be. Perhaps it's going to be a decapitation attempt on Russia, actually, by the United States and NATO. Perhaps it's going to be something else, but nevertheless, it's going to be a very important worldwide event that we will remember throughout history. So that is something to pay attention to. But let's very quickly look through all of these news associated with the Tomahawks, because Tomahawks in this particular case are very important, because as I've discussed earlier, they can be nuclear tipped, and Russia doesn't know whether or not, if, for example, Ukraine or somebody else, well, only the US or the military is able to shoot it towards Russia, if that even occurs. But Russia is not going to be able to tell whether those missiles coming in are nuclear tipped or not, and that becomes a giant problem, because it can really literally trigger the nuclear war as soon as today, as soon as tomorrow, because the info on the ground, at least, is that some of those missiles are already in Ukraine. So this is a very serious matter that we have to pay attention to. So Donald Trump plans to send Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, braces for World War III. what happened to the peace? What happened to peace within 45 minutes? Whatever he was saying during the campaign, I have no idea what happened to that. But now he's even Biden was not escalating to such an extent, because as you will see, Tomahawks not solve Ukraine conflict. Obviously, it's not important weapon in those terms. It's not going to skew Russia one way or another. If it is successful, the probability is they're going to shoot down most of them. But this is not the issue. The issue is, as Colonel Doug McGregor here in this video indicates, is the Russians don't know whether those missiles coming in will be armed with nuclear weapons or not. And Russian government is essentially saying the same thing. Here you see Medvedev discussing the same thing. If you want a very good in-depth analysis on the subject matter and the current situation, I highly encourage you to look up this video on YouTube. It just probably was published a couple of hours ago, and you can listen to that particular analysis in much greater detail. But he's essentially saying exactly the same thing that I'm saying. This is very problematic because it accomplishes nothing. It just brings us much closer to World War III against, once again, Russia, and behind Russia there's going to be China. Okay, so Medvedev, who is second in line behind Putin, used to be president of Russia. If you recall that period of time, I believe it was 2010, perhaps earlier than that, maybe 2008, 2010, 2012, something like that. They switched with Putin to where he became president, and Putin became prime minister or something similar to that effect. But that's not necessarily important. What's important is that he's number 2 in Russian government, and he's basically coming out and saying, listen, Trump, and they have this game, you know, good cop, bad cop game with Putin, where Putin is being very diplomatic, being very soft, but at the same time, Medvedev is coming out and saying, listen, Trump, if you want World War III, that's exactly what's going to happen with these Tomahawk missiles. So, as you can see right here, he says, you know, it could end badly for everyone, most of all for Trump himself. So you can, you know, many attribute it to be a direct threat against Trump, and it is all well and fine because it is a direct threat against everyone in this nation. Okay, so if they do shoot the Tomahawk missiles and Russia deem it to be nuclear, for example, first of all, everybody's saying, or they're indicating that it's impossible to say whether a Tomahawk coming in is a nuclear or not. Okay, so that's the biggest factor, because if there's a missile coming towards Moscow or St. Petersburg, who's going to decide what happens next? Well, it's going to be people like Putin and Medvedev, and you know, he very clearly indicates here that they can essentially push the red button. So I'm not sure what Trump is thinking about this particular situation. It's absolutely an unnecessary risk to take. It will do absolutely nothing to sway the war one way or another. Russians are winning on the ground. They advancing on the entire front line. Kiev is on its last leg, and this particular step will not accomplish a single thing other than to plunge the world into World War III. So some talk about this being a possible psyop to pressure Russian leadership into accepting some sort of a peace deal with Ukraine, but that in effect is not going to happen. Once again, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago or a few seconds ago, Russia is winning on the ground. They are advancing with great speed. Ukrainian military is collapsing, and there's absolutely no need for Russia to make any sort of a deal with anyone, because they perfectly understand that any sort of a deal, any sort of a ceasefire at this juncture would essentially entail that Ukraine is going to be able to regroup, get new weapons, and continue to war. And that's exactly what the West wants, and that's exactly what Russia is trying to avoid. So they're not going to play that game at this time. So Trump bringing this, let me see. So this is going to be the subject discussed when this bag of you know, I don't want to curse in this video, but this sack of shit, excuse my language, there's no other way to put it, is coming to Washington to discuss this particular matter. And this is a war criminal. This is the people who's responsible for killing over 1 million people in Ukraine, his own people, for absolutely no reason, for money, as a matter of fact. And so he's coming to discuss this matter with Trump, and it's going to be up to Trump to decide what's going to happen, but I'm not sure really who's advising Trump. This shouldn't be on anybody's table. As we just learned from the articles before, this is a risk that no one has to take at this juncture, and the only thing that makes me believe that this situation is going to be avoidable at this time is our overall war forecast that indicates that nuclear war, while will happen in summer of 2029, or that the nuclear exchange. The war has already started, as you can see. As a matter of fact, the U.S. is very close to being directly kinetically involved with Russia. And I think what's going to happen on December 13th, time turning point, plus or minus 2 weeks, margin of error, is exactly that. Something's going to happen where perhaps there's going to be a decapitation strike against Russia, because Russia has absolutely no interest in Europe, Russia has no interest in NATO, and Russia has no interest in having any sort of a war with the United States. So the only way to trigger this particular event is the United States, NATO, has to attack Russia. And I think that's what's going to happen. But the response coming from the Russian side is going to be so significant that it's going to be written, for centuries in history books, at least according to our work, because remember, this ties up with financial markets, and financial markets indicate that something's going to happen in December, around that December 13th time turning point, where volatility spikes significantly. Financial markets, I don't want to say melt down, but decline quite substantially. And something's going to happen in geopolitical events, or there's going to be significant geopolitical event that's going to develop. So all things point towards that, and these Tomahawk missiles play an incredibly important role in all of this. So this is something to watch. It is unfortunate that Trump and Trump administration has changed its tune, and they've changed from, there's going to be peace in 24 hours to coming very, very close to having an all-out nuclear war with Russia. And by the way, no one survives that. If you live in America, as I do, and you think you're going to survive that, you're absolutely mistaken. There's going to be nothing left. Okay? So this is a gamble we do not need at this point in time. So let's see what else. And as I mentioned earlier, now there's intelligence coming out, and everybody knows it. All of us analysts know that. All the people who follow the situation know this. Russia knows this. Basically, U.S. is playing an integral role in supplying targeting data. As a matter of fact, they're probably pulling the trigger on some of the weapon systems out there and directly targeting Russian infrastructure, such as oil. So you can argue, this is a clear declaration of war. It is just, we should be thankful as Americans, as a matter of fact, that we have somebody like Putin in power on the other side, who is very measured and very controlled. I talked yesterday about the fact that it's a huge negative, because it's going to eventually lead us to an all-out nuclear war, and I still believe that. But at least for the time being, it is preventing much bigger war from unfolding. But at what point the United States is going to cross that red line with Russia? Well, Tomahawks can be it. It's going to be interesting to see what develops out of it. So let's see what else. So we have this idiot Germany style. I really don't know how these people end up in power. Look at this. Putin could attack EU at any moment. Why? This is very simple. Why? You have to think about it. Why would Putin attack the European Union? What is there except multiculturalism, as they call it, that they want? Russia has all the natural resources that they need for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. They have the landmass, they have the people. What in Europe? It's very simple. It's illogical to think otherwise. What in Europe do they need to attack it? They don't need the money. The Europe doesn't have any money. It's broke. It's all digital anyway. So why would Russia attack Europe? But this is what they're telling their populace. This is what they use for propaganda and to scare their populace. Because why? Because very simple. They are preparing for war. They're the vassal of the United States, and everybody knows that everybody's positioning and everybody's preparing for that high-level kinetic war. That's going to not probably, but you know when that's going to happen in September, not September, but August of 2029, a nuclear war between NATO members and Russia and China alliance. Okay, so that's topic number one. The secondary topic is, let's talk about the stock market. Stocks are surging because apparently everything is good between the US and China at the very least. It's surging on the news that there's going to be a meeting between Trump and at some point in the future. I'm not even sure when. And according to the speculators, that is all good and fine. And we're back to near all-time highs in the stock market. Yesterday we talked about the fact that this war against this economic war against China and the rest of the world in form of tariffs is absolute sheer stupidity, lunacy, whatever you want to call it, and we're seeing the fruits of it. So this is the news coming out of Beijing. They basically coming out and vowing to fight to the end. And as I talked about yesterday, they have all the cards. The United States needs China much more than China needs the United States. Sure, it's a very important export market for them, but the rest of the world is doing quite well as well. So yeah, they're going to lose some money, but they're going to lose everything. But the reason Trump came out very angrily on Friday, and as we talked about yesterday, is the fact that they're putting limits on rare earth exports. And that's exactly what the United States needs for its military machine and the tech sector. I'm sorry. So it's a much bigger problem for the United States. Not only that, China owns a tremendous amount of U.S. debt, as everybody knows. So if they begin to sell, that's going to increase interest rates and collapse the U.S. economy. So China holds most cards in this particular game. And then you have U.S. Treasury Secretary coming out and blaming China for all of this. And it's like we're living in a clown world. So these people truly believe that by unleashing economic warfare, unleashing tariffs on China and other countries, they're not going to get a response. But that's exactly what they're getting. And then they of course cry uncle, and they come out and they say that China is playing unfair and blah blah and so on and so forth. And of course it's entirely predictable. They've done this before. And I mean, you can argue that 1929 collapse was because of this, because of protectionism, because of tariffs, and we don't need that. Yesterday I talked about the fact that tariffs will do absolutely nothing for the United States other than to increase prices. It's not going to add to our overall economic picture. It's just going to create problems. There's many other ways to compete on an international stage than to put these tariffs in. But these people, they're absolutely economically uneducated, and they have no idea what they're doing, and because of that they've triggered this particular war with China that will have no end in sight, because Trump is being Trump, and he's unwilling to back down, probably because he has people like this, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, advising him, and according to him this is the best way forward to restore America's greatness. But I would argue that it is absolutely not the way to restore American greatness, because it has nothing to do with that. Okay, there are other structures that you can put in place where America can compete on a world stage and increase and surpass what MAGA is trying to accomplish. But they're not willing to do that. They're willing to put these tariffs in place that will not do anything. So, and yesterday I talked about, particularly because we have so much debt, over $38 trillion in debt. So whatever revenue it's going to generate, additional revenue, well, first of all, as I said yesterday, it's going to be passed down to the U.S. consumer, but most of it. It's all funny money at this point. They're just printing like crazy. So inflation, tariffs, it's all a really, really bad idea. And if you go to Paul Kirk-Roberts, he essentially indicates a very, very similar line of thoughts, explaining it a little bit different. There's absolutely nothing good about it, and Trump finally learns the cost of being a bully. So he came out and he punched everybody in the face on a worldwide stage, punched China in the face in terms of these economic tariffs and economic warfare. And you know, he's getting pushed back, and he's getting slapped back or punched back, whatever you want to call it. And the fact that it's most likely going to escalate and escalate significantly going forward has increased dramatically, because nobody wants to lose face. China doesn't want to lose face. The U.S. doesn't want to lose face, and that's just going to continue to roll down the hill. So another reason that stocks are higher today is because of Powell coming out and basically saying that this government shutdown is not going to have any effect. He didn't commit to interest rate cuts, as we've been always suggesting. Short-term yield or short-term end of the yield curve leads the Fed typically. So if we look at that, you know, this is, let me zoom out this chart a little bit, year to date. So this was the first hike, 25 basis point. It once again led the Fed into imposing that, and this is the secondary one that is most likely going to happen here in October. But after that, the market is signaling, or it's not signaling anything at this point in time. So perhaps it's going to continue to decline, and will give the Fed a little bit more breathing room in terms of cutting further interest rates. But the 10-year itself hasn't moved very much and been stuck in the trading range for over, I believe, at least 2 years. So it is not signaling anything. And the Fed is stuck between a hard and rock place, because you know, at this stage, even though Trump wants them to cut, there's not much room to cut. And so yeah, that's something that we all dealing with. But on the flip side, or in conclusion to all of this, I see a lot of people freaking out about the gold and the silver. Let me just mention very quickly, we did an update on both gold. We didn't do the one on silver, but essentially gold is stopping as we speak. It is lining up with the overall stock market. It pushed a little bit above our prior targets into the next set of targets, but nevertheless, just be very, very careful and be aware that gold is stopping as well. And once the stock market turns around and begins to accelerate lower, gold will follow. In the future, we'll go higher than where we are today, but at least for the time being, that's the situation. So don't be alarmed with that. Yeah, so that's it. So as you can see, everything is kind of rolling down the hill towards. Let me just very quickly summarize a very important event to develop at the end of December. Oh, I'm sorry, not the end of December, December 13, plus or minus 2 weeks. And then subsequently, we, as you can see for yourself, things are getting very, very bad between NATO and Russia, and China by default. And all of those things will come to head by the summer of 2029. And let me just very quickly suggest that you better be prepared by that juncture, not be in the Northern Hemisphere, be somewhere else. My book that's going to be published probably the following week, I'll make it available here. You'll be going to be able to see what countries we recommend to be at in order to avoid all of that. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for your time. Have a wonderful day ahead. Bye-bye.